So if you've been a Bulls fan for a really long time like I have, you'll know that despite a dynasty in the 90s and some success in the D-Rose years, throughout that whole time, it has been known widely that the Bulls and their respective front offices have never really had the best relationships with their players and coaches, and that's really been the case for a good part of, say, 3 decades. That was the case with Jerry Krause in the 90s and his frayed relationship with Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson, and of course Scottie Pippen. And then when John Paxson took over in the early 2000s, later to be taken over by Gar Forman around that time when the Bulls drafted Derrick Rose, the front office was never known for their overall strong relationships with players, which, okay, you can say that might be the case for a lot of teams. I mean, at the end of the day, the NBA is a business, and the management team is there to improve the business and ensure they're generating revenue, and not to get emotionally invested in the players. But at the same time, as the NBA has evolved, that player-front office relationship has become more and more important because the league has started shifting to be a more players-run league that gives them more leverage than they ever had before. On top of that, we now have social media and a host of other outlets that allows for rumors, player drama to be much more public than it ever was before, which means that GMs are held more accountable for how they treat their players, and they don't want to be known as a front office with problems to deter free agents from coming to their organization. And that's really been the biggest problem for the Bulls when it comes to attracting free agents, because not only was the Bulls management seen to be incompetent across the league for so many years, but also that they were cutthroat and not the type of managers you would want to work for. I mean, it's the same like you would have for any job. You are likely not wanting to join a new company for a management team that appears to be incompetent and doesn't care about their people. You would rather look for a job elsewhere. Now, of course, the Bulls ownership finally put an end to the Gar-Pax era, bringing in Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, and although it's still very early in this new era, and the new front office does have a lot to prove in terms of how they're going to go about turning around this franchise, what has been promising thus far is the drastic shift in player relationships that we've seen from these guys. And that's what I want to talk about today. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. So in case you missed it, the Bulls Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations, Arturas Karnisovas, gave his first presser last night prior to the game against the Nuggets, his former team that he used to manage. This was in his first press conference since training camp, and it was good to hear his thoughts on how he thinks the season has been going. His thoughts on various players were also coming about and their overall development, his relationship with Billy Donovan, and also just his general overall outlook for the team going forward. Casey Johnson actually wrote a great article highlighting some of the key takeaways from the interview, which I'll link in the description. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. But because, I have to hear everything that was said, I watched the whole 16 minutes, and there were some important things to note that I wanted to highlight and share today. So like I mentioned in the intro, as the Bulls, as Bulls fans, we've always been used to not having the best front offices. Front offices that have been known to lack in a number of things, but particularly around player and coaching relationships, which I truly feel is so critical in a team's overall success. Because as I mentioned, it's like any other job. When you have leaders who are inspiring, that get to know you personally and value who you are and what you contribute to the organization, it increases morale overall, and the team is able to feed off of that and be more productive as a result. Now, what I will say, the first time I saw Arturas give an interview shortly after being hired as the new EVP, I thought he was a little cold, not very outspoken, and initially it kind of worried me, but I also knew he was a very successful GM with the Nuggets, so I thought, okay, well, he must be doing something right given how he's developed that team. And the more and more that we've seen from Arturas, and also heard about him from the players, that just shows how AK is in terms of, his slightly more serious demeanor, quick and to the point responses to questions from media, his honest approach. And what I thought was the most telling was some of the comments made by these star players on the Nuggets that they gave last night. And this came from a separate article, which Casey Johnson also wrote, in which he quoted Jamal Murray saying, "He's a really good dude. We enjoyed his time while he was in Denver. He was always talking to me. That's someone who always wants, the best for you. I met his wife. He let me come over and his kid was hooping and all of that. He's just a good guy, one of those family guys you love to keep in contact with. You're going to hear that same kind of answer from everybody. Just a good guy who does his job really well. Now, Murray also added that he still keeps in touch with Arturas and that they text frequently, and he also mentioned that part of the reason they were so successful these past couple years is because of his relationship with the players. And then you also have a quote from Nikola Jokic in which he said, "I just have a long relationship with him. He's from Europe, so we have a similar mindset. He's a great guy to have. This is a new challenge for him. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to do." Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, so what? They said a couple nice things about their former boss, but it's honestly more than that. I think the fact that AK has chosen to still keep in contact with them shows more about his character as a guy who values player relationships, even though he's on a new team with a new job, a new group of guys. The fact that he's still taking time out of his day to keep in contact with them demonstrates the kind of leader he is in keeping those relationships and that network open. It's also good to hear that both of these guys respect him so much because just like any other job, if you've had an amazing boss and they leave for a new role, you may want to work for them in the future, and perhaps that will entice these stars and players like Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic to come play for the Bulls whenever they hit free agency. It might be wishful thinking on my part, but I'd also like to think that Arturas is keeping those lines of communications open for a reason. Now, aside from what Nuggets players said about him, let's talk about this press conference, because what Arturas had to say about this team is important. And first and foremost, that he's been pleased with the team's performance. Obviously, still a lot of work to do, but given how they started off the season and how they develop now, has been a good improvement, and he credits a lot of that to Billy Donovan. Now, he did talk at length about his relationship with Billy Donovan, how he's doing a great job, how there's a clear understanding between them on how to develop and improve the team, especially after every game, and he's thankful to have him around as a coach, which is great to see because we know the previous front office more often than not did not see eye to eye with their coaches, mainly looking at Tom Thibodeau. And there was always a disconnect and miscommunication on what was being relayed from the top all the way down to the players as a result. So it was very clear from the press conference that the relationship is strong there, but I want to focus more on the players here rather than Billy Donovan, because I think most of us knew they've been a great pair since Arturas was all over and hiring Billy Donovan when he became available. AK did talk about Lavine and making his first All-Star game, but when asked if Zach has proven to be a franchise player for the Bulls, he responded by saying he's deserving right now of his accolades and made an all-star game, and we are really proud of him. We're constantly in games because of his play, so he's been establishing himself as a leader of this team, and we've improved dramatically because he's impacting winning. Now, he kind of avoided in answering the question directly and not saying yes, that Zach is the franchise's cornerstone, but obviously he's very pleased with how he's been doing, and more importantly, how Zach has contributed to winning games, which is important because I think the biggest thing for Lavine previously was whether or not he can take his talent and skill and turn that into winning. I think it's all but clear that any rumors on Lavine getting traded are no longer applicable based on how Arturas sees Zach as a huge contributing piece to this team. Now, on that note, he did address questions around the looming trade deadline on March 25th, and he's really stuck to what he's been saying from the get-go, that he really likes the current guys that he has, that he wants to see how everyone fits with the roster going forward, and rather than looking to move players, the focus right now is on winning. So he said expanding the playoffs to 10 teams, and then you have 2 or 3 that are still delusional and think that they can make it to 10. I think that makes a very interesting trade deadline, but you know, Billy and I spend more time talking about how we can improve this group and focus now on this group that we have that's actually playing well and had a first month of winning in February. I never look at players as trade commodities. Right now, we're focused on winning games because the separation between 4th and 10th place is a game and a half. So I just think the teams are going to try and improve, and there's not going to be a lot of sellers. So I think we're going to focus on our guys and how to get them better. That's end quote. So I think that, a response like this is telling in that, one, highly unlikely they're going to make any moves before the deadline, as they're more focused on improving the current group of guys. But at the same time, I think this also is just a way of Arturas not wanting to stir the pot and create any rumors if there were any potential trade deals being discussed. And I think this is also just a way for Arturas not wanting to stir the pot and create create any rumors if there were potential trade deals being discussed. And I think, he's more focused on making more drastic changes in the offseason, which is how he structured these player contracts to have all that cap flexibility that enables him to structure the team as his own rather than what he inherited from Gar Pax. He also did touch on Lauri Markkanen as well, which I know a lot of Bulls fans have been talking about how we need to trade him before the deadline and that he's soft and dead weight. He did mention that Lauri has met their expectations in terms of what they've wanted from him in the preseason, obviously before he got hurt, and that they're really looking forward to having him back. Markkanen has also said their relationship continues to build and they really value and respect one another. So I do think AK does see Markkanen as part of the Bulls' future plans as long as he comes back strong, playing like he was before he went out, and of course for a contract that is within reason for his skills. Remember that Lauri will be a restricted free agent and the Bulls will have the ability to match any offer Markkanen receives in free agency. Overall though, I think the thing that has me most excited about this new regime and how it started off, this press conference aside, is how much more player relationships and development are being made a focal point in the success of the organization, because that has not been the case in the past, and it has greatly impacted the overall success of the franchise. When players aren't happy, they don't feel respected, they feel the management isn't open and transparent, it impacts their playing on the court. And not only that, but it impacts other players' decisions on whether they come to Chicago knowing that type of toxic environment exists at the top. Like I said, it's early on in the Arturas Karnisovas, Marc Eversley era. Still a lot to prove, but based on how the change in chemistry, the behavior and energy we've seen from the players thus far, on top of all the things they've commented and said about the new front office, that's noteworthy because we really haven't seen that in a long time from this franchise. I don't know about you guys, but I honestly can't think of any time last season where a player spoke highly of the front office, especially as it related to their personal relationship with them. Let me know if maybe you guys feel differently in that regard, if it's something I've just maybe missed. But guys, the Bulls will be taking on the Pelicans tomorrow in their final game before the All-Star break. I'll have a live chat for the game on the channel as well as the Discord, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. And as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan and you like daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.